system can't be said to work as well as it could, but by and large, it does function. It functions quite well, and international trade until recent years has been increasing steadily. It has now, because of the downturn from 2008, has been shrinking. If, as, and when there is again an increase in an important recovery of the economic process in the various countries of the world, international trade can be expected to increase also. Okay, we will now take a short bathroom break and reconvene and take up international finance. Okay, let's reconvene. For the benefit of those of you who joined the class late, let me just mention that the reason, of course, that I sent the final exam yesterday is so that if you have any questions about the exam, that you can email me in plenty of time for me to respond and for you to take the time that's necessary between now and Friday to respond to the final examination. Again, I'm sure you would be amazed at how often people do not pay attention to the instruction, answer 2 of the 3 questions or answer 1 of the 2 questions, and answer both or all 3, and I suppose it's either being careless or thinking that they will get extra credit if they answer all of the questions. I assure you that is not the case. If you answer both questions, I will read them both because I will be interested in what you have to say. But I will base base the grade on one of the two, which I will pick. If I were you, since either one of the questions that I've asked will require a lot of work on your part, of background work, and putting together the necessary data and analytical and synthetic work, putting things together in the proper way, that you pay attention to the instruction, answer one of the following two questions. The other thing I wanted to mention, again for the benefit of those of you who may have joined the class late, is that following this class session, which is the last of the semester, I will be more than delighted to receive messages from you anytime in the future with questions or comments that you may have, questions that you would like my view on, comments, suggestions of articles that you've read that you think might be of interest to me that I may not have seen, or anything of that kind. The Institute of World Politics has only 2 courses on economics. This one and economic statecraft, both of which are going to be given in the spring semester. It could easily have 5 or 6 courses on economics. Maybe someday it will. But in any case, situations will come up where you might find it useful to ask me, get my input on it, and so on. Simply because you're interested, or something having to do with your work. And again, you're more than welcome to communicate with me in the future. All right. International finance. International finance has to do with the same things as we discussed. Again, it's finance with an adjective. That we discuss the monetary system and the financial system now as applied to the world as a whole, as opposed to an individual country. International finance as opposed to domestic finance. Nevertheless, there are many, many more similarities between the two than there are differences. It's simply finance with an adjective. Let's start with a discussion of finance, and then we'll go into the international monetary system. There are various forms of finance among countries and among groups and individuals within countries. The first that we're going to take up is trade finance. It's the simplest form. It is the financing of trade operations. It can be used also to finance the provision of services. Generally, it is short-term financing, usually 6 months or a year. It is relatively low-risk financing because the collateral for the loans is the product being financed. In other words, if there's any problem, you can simply seize the good involved. You can't do that in terms of services, so that is somewhat more risky than trade financing as applied to goods. Nevertheless, it's very straightforward. It is in a very large portion of international finance, and there are few problems connected with it. Secondly is medium and long-term lending. Medium and long-term lending is generally for the purposes of one of two purposes. It's either for the purpose of liquidity support to the other country, or it's for the purpose of project lending. This is much riskier, of course. If it's for liquidity support, it is granted on the assumption the other country is going to address its liquidity problem properly and be able to repay. That the other country may do or it may not do, and the recourses that the lending country has are relatively few If it's project lending, again, whether it's risky or not or less risky, has to do with the kind of project involved. It is often an adjunct to foreign direct investment. That is, there is an equity aspect and a debt aspect to a particular project. Very often the credit analysis has to do with the other country that's involved. It also has to do with the company that is making the investment. You get into a complex set of analyses, which you don't get with trade finance. And even though you can try to collateralize project financing, for example, the project has to be somewhere, so there may be land that can be pledged as collateral. There may be buildings, machinery, and equipment that can be pledged for collateral. All of this is more difficult to do anything with or to seize than in the case of trade financing, where you simply seize the cargo of goods that have been defaulted on. And the third form of international finance is foreign direct investment, or FDI, and that is where a foreign country or a corporation or other entity of a foreign country makes a direct investment in the economy of the country involved, and that is an equity investment. General Motors establishes a plant in Germany or in Brazil. General Motors owns the plant, either owns or rents the land the plant is on. It provides the machinery and equipment. It hires the labor. It will send management probably from the United States, at least initially. Eventually the management is likely to be more local. And General Motors, will invest X number of dollars in the plant in Germany, let's say, and it will also borrow money to supplement the direct investment, and so that it has that risk element also. What is the risk of a direct investment? It's the risk of any investment, and namely that the investment may not be successful, but it has an added risk, which is not the case to the same extent in domestic investment, and that is a risk that the foreign country, the government of the foreign country, may interfere and take action against you. Recently, Argentina, for example, confiscated the portion of an oil company that was owned by a Spanish company, and the compensation offered was not accepted. But what is the Spanish company going to do? Can bring a case in the Argentine courts. The effect of that is probably going to be nil. Can bring a case in the Spanish courts, but those judgments will not be applied in Argentina unless Argentina permits that to happen, which is not going to do, obviously. If the countries are members of a subsidiary of the World Bank that provides an arbitration mechanism for investment by one country in another country, that arbitral panel can be invoked, and its judgment is supposed to be applied by the country's members. But if the countries don't do that, again, there is little or nothing that the country that's won the arbitral award or the company that's won the arbitral award can do about it. It can, of course, lobby its own government to bring pressure on the government that's taking this action. That may be effective, it may not be effective, and its own government may not even want to bother with it because it has its own fish to fry with reference to the other country involved or third countries which may be concerned in one way or another. So, relatively risk-free in the case of trade finance. relatively with substantial risks in the case of international project lending, and substantial risk also in the case of foreign direct investment. And in many cases, foreign direct investment involves a debt factor also, so it has those two risks. It has the commercial risk and it has the political risk, as they are ordinarily referred to. All right, the international monetary system. I'm tempted to say there is no international monetary system, and in a sense that's true, because the international monetary system that was created at the end of World War II collapsed in the 1970s and has not been recreated, and therefore what you have is not a true international monetary system. You have what you have is what countries actually do, what banks and financial institutions, corporations, and other international actors actually do in terms of money. From the beginning of time, the beginning of the use of money, there has been a dominant currency that has been used in international trade and finance more than any other. Since the decline of the pound sterling after World War I, the U.S. dollar gradually became the international currency, and according to the Bretton Woods agreements following World War II, the U.S. dollar was supposed to be based on a weight of gold. The U.S. renounced that in the 1970s, and at this point there is no metallic anchor for the international monetary system. Countries do maintain gold reserves, which may seem anachronistic since they're not paid in gold, but they still do maintain them, and they have a value. That value has increased greatly recently because of the financial and economic problems of the last few years, and gold has always been seen through history as an asset of last resort, a monetary asset of last resort. A very interesting thing has happened recently because of the financial sanctions on Iran. Iran has continued to export natural gas to Turkey, and Turkey has been paying for the gas by gold instead of dollars, in order to avoid the financial sanctions that have been put on financial transactions by the U.S. Treasury. So this is an example of the use of the gold reserve for actual financial, and in this case trade transactions. Because the U.S. Economy is weak and has been for now at least 4 years, going on 5, because of the deficit and debt situation of the United States, countries have been trying to diversify their reserve holdings out of dollars into other assets. The problem is that what other assets? That's quite simply the problem. Countries have been buying gold. A lot of countries try to diversify by putting part of their reserves in euro dollars, but obviously that is no longer an attractive alternative. Some have been holding yen, some have been holding Swiss francs, and just recently some have begun holding the Chinese currency, which is variably called the renminbi or the yuan. But all of this is relatively small. The U.S. dollar, for lack of an alternative, is still the international money in effect, and that is an unsustainable situation in the long term. But what will replace it is by no means clear, and the international monetary system is regulated by the International Monetary Fund, located in Washington, which is the international finance equivalent of the World Trade Organization for international trade. The International Monetary Fund was, of course, created to supervise the international monetary system that was set up by the Bretton Woods Conference at the end of World War II, which was based on a dollar, which in turn was defined by a weight of gold. When the United States violated that system and withdrew, and the dollar no longer had a gold anchor, the International Monetary Fund actually had no function anymore. It should probably have gone out of existence, but international agencies as well as government agencies never go out of existence. And so what they did was look around and find other things to do. And what they have been doing ever since the International Monetary Fund has been, aside from doing what all the international agencies do, which is collecting statistics and doing analyses and publications of various kinds, some of which are quite valuable and worthwhile. It has become a lender to countries which have liquidity problems. And these aren't just countries like Argentina, Mexico, Brazil, and so on and so forth. Britain has borrowed from the International Monetary Fund. Other advanced countries have borrowed from the International Monetary Fund from time to time. If the problem is truly a liquidity problem, this is a very useful function. If it's not a liquidity problem, but basically an insolvency problem, the International Monetary Fund can do nothing effective about it except to make the problem worse, as we discussed in a previous session. One last comment is about another international institution called the Bank for Central Banks, which is in Basel, Switzerland, and it's the coordinating mechanism whereby central banks come together and negotiate with each other, and it has also the function of serving as a clearinghouse for inter-central bank balances. As there are clearinghouses for commercial banks, there are about 6 clearinghouses for commercial banks around the world. The Bank of International Settlements in Basel, or BIS, is the clearing mechanism for central banks. It also does a lot of analytical work, collects statistics, and has publications. It is very good at that. Okay, we are now going to go into the subject of economic development. Entire libraries can be filled with books about economic development. Many journals devote tremendous amounts of space to books about economic development. Much of this, quite frankly, is a total waste of time. Economic development has been looked at from a lot of different standpoints. It has been looked at historically. Why did some countries develop? Why did other countries not? It has been looked at even from the standpoint of definition. What is meant by economic development? Is it simply an increase in gross